it's fascinating, but also entirely unsurprising that establishment Democrats and Republicans, two cheeks of the same butt, are aligned in their efforts to try to destroy the progressive movement in the United States, particularly when it comes to DSA candidates. But not just DSA, not just DSA. Any of the more progressive members of the Democratic Party are functionally a threat to the establishment. I, for one, tend to align much more with Working Families Party, and there are ways that I will get behind DSA candidates, but I don't necessarily agree with 100% of their platform. But you're seeing this coordinated messaging from the establishment of both political parties, right, that is trying to paint the DSA as incredibly radical and incredibly fringe. And we're seeing Donald Trump and Mike Pence and Stephen Miller try to frame the DSA as communists, and I think that that is going to fail utterly. I think that it is messaging that immediately smacks of being hyperbolic, because it is. I think it is this kind of McCarthyism, Red Scare, propaganda that's not going to work on people, especially because we're seeing from DSA candidates this really clearly articulated, effective messaging about what their platform is and what their priorities are. Right now, that platform is quite simple and essentially four-pronged, although there's a whole other list of things in the background, and I'll talk about those in a second. But, basically it is stop funding Israel's war machine and their genocide in Gaza with our tax dollars, our hard-earned tax dollars. Number two is healthcare for all, Medicare for all, universal healthcare, however you want to frame it. Dr. Abdul El-Sayed he did write the book on Medicare for all. Number three is abolishing ICE. ICE is not old enough to rent a car. ICE was only created in 2002. There is no reason that we have to continue to spend obscene quantities of money. ICE is the 15th most well-funded military, paramilitary in the entire world. Huge amounts of taxpayer dollars going to ICE. Needs to be abolished. By the way, these are all very popular, right? Very popular opinions. Then number four is some form of taxing the rich. In permaculture, we would say fair share, right? Fair share. The rich do not pay their fair share of taxes. And of course, there's other elements behind that as well. But, what we see the establishment pushing really hard is this narrative that you guys don't know, DSA are sneaky, and they want all of these kind of extreme, they want to abolish the Senate. They want to do all of these kind of really extreme things, and you don't know what kind of radicals you're supporting. I want to talk about that for a second, because we've seen a number of interviews and a number of news stories lately that are projecting this kind of messaging.
I've been concerned within DSA that candidates co-signing things like abolishing the Supreme Court and the U.S. Senate are too far left, at least in this moment, to win over moderates and independents nationally.
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a really common media narrative that we've been hearing again and again. But I think if you talk to regular people, they know that something's extremely broken with our political system, and they want to change it. And this is true across the political spectrum. So we're offering a new vision, and more people are getting on board.
Yeah, and to be fair, that extreme narrative isn't coming from people opposed to DSA. It's coming from people inside DSA actively saying during your organizing meetings that we want to abolish prisons. So I understand that you don't agree with everything that a party has to offer, but that's coming from inside of your the organization you're a part of.
If I could jump in here, I would take a page out of Senator Sanders' handbook and say that the radical thing is not the idea that we should decrease our incarcerated population. The radical position is that America should have the most people in prison of any country in modern history, which is the current state of affairs. And I think if you ask most Americans if they think that is not only fiscally responsible, but morally conscionable, they would say no.
This, right. Obviously, I'm somebody who has advocated for prison abolition and restorative justice for a long time, but we live in a heavily carceral state. We live in a state where so much of this kind of evangelical, no, I would argue not just evangelical, but also Catholic notion of punishment, right? You have to be punished for your sins and your crimes, and that has to involve deprivation of your freedom, being locked up. And now we have the for-profit prison system where just like the concentration camps that Geo Group and Core Civic is running for the Department of Homeland Security, prisons are incredibly profitable machines where people are functionally forced into slavery. At any given point in time, there are almost 2 million people in jails and prisons in the United States. Currently 1.8 million people. We spend huge quantities of public money incarcerating folks, and for-profit institutions often benefit. It's not just the tax dollars that are keeping those people imprisoned that's profitable, it's the forced labor. It's the forced labor. It is functionally slavery. Our Constitution allows for there to be slavery for people who are in prison. Louisiana is particularly bad at this. I'll drop a link in the video description, but promiseforjustice.org has a really good section on how much incarcerated labor there is in Louisiana, how basically imprisoned people, overwhelmingly Black men, are forced to serve as slaves in Louisiana because they have committed crimes. There is an incentive in this country, a heavy incentive for the criminal justice system to incarcerate people so that they can be exploited for their labor. It's nonsensical. It's nonsensical. If we took the kind of money that we currently pump into our prison system and we reduced poverty, the number one way to reduce crime is to reduce poverty, is to feed and house people. If we took all of that money that we spend insisting, right, we have this fervent desire as a nation to punish people, to make people suffer for their moral failings and their crimes. If we shifted to restorative justice, if we decided to think outside the box, right, just like the DSA is doing, saying prisons don't work, they don't rehabilitate people, they don't reduce crime, they cost the taxpayer a ton, they destroy families, and they benefit the super rich, they benefit corporations, they benefit racist institutions and those in power. But they're not good for our society. What if we looked at this in a different way? In permaculture, we say the problem is the solution. We're trying to be solution-minded. We're always trying to reframe the situation. If we have an entrenched institution or something in our society that isn't serving our needs, our laws and our institutions, our policy, the way that our society is set up should serve the needs of the people. We should not be serving laws. We should not be serving institutions. They should be made to benefit us. And if they're not, if they're a detriment to us, then we should be examining them, dismantling them, and doing something different. We don't have to have something now just because it's what we've always had, right? Or just because it's something that we've had for, like ICE, that we've had for, less than 25 years. We can actually do something different. And I think that's one of the reasons that the DSA is so compelling for people, is because it's giving people a chance to imagine a different future. It's giving people a chance to talk about, what would it look like if we dismantled X and we instituted Y? What would it look like if we tried to do something different than we're doing it right now? I do think, being in this moment in the United States, that we have a chance to look straight on at all of our problems and say, the Supreme Court is corrupt. Why is it that we're okay with having 9 justices who serve for life and there's basically no ethics and no oversight for them? Why do we have to continue to put up with this? We could reform the Supreme Court. There have been a lot of folks talking for many, many years about Supreme Court reforms, but they just kind of got pushed off. Well, now we're at a moment where it's in our faces and we're like, wait a minute, why are we putting up with this? The same thing, a majority of Americans now want to abolish ICE. A majority of Americans are not down with DHS at all. We don't have to continue to have this. We don't have to continue to have this. I was a married adult woman when DHS and ICE was created. It's not something I had for half my life, right? And so we can decide to do something different. We can change things. We are not beholden to these institutions or these laws. They should be serving us, and we can just switch them up. We can try something different. I think that's what makes DSA so compelling, right? We have been raised very much with this Christian worldview that says punishment first, obedience and punishment. We are in a fascist society right now. We are under the burden of authoritarianism because we raise our children with authoritarian parenting. But authoritarianism and the idea of being punitive is so pervasive in our culture. It's how we treat our children. It's how we have the school to prison pipeline. It's how we treat children in schools. It's how we treat people in prisons. And we don't have to have that. We could radically remake all of that. I realize my non-authoritarian parenting is coming to the forefront here. So when we see establishment Democrats and we see Republicans talking about how the DSA wants to do these really radical things, okay, what's wrong with that? The Republicans are destroying the Department of Education. They have no problem coming in and saying, we're dismantling USAID. We're destroying USAID. We're destroying large sections of the federal government. Nobody is saying that's radical or extreme. The DSA is saying, we have these institutions and these laws that don't meet our needs. Let's build something different that works. It's particularly compelling to the American people in this moment.